In the freezing winds of the northern Cheorwan conflict zone, Deputy Director Shim Dae-yong arrives on a mission. At the border checkpoint, a soldier confirms his ID is verified. The heavy gates labeled Danger slowly grind open, granting him access to the wasteland. Shim sets out alone, trekking across a desolate landscape buried in snow and debris. He checks his device, pulling up a holographic map to pinpoint his destination. The coordinates lead him further into the white void. It's been 50 years since daybreak, the moment the world changed forever and awakened humans first appeared. Dungeons opened up everywhere, and monsters started pouring out in waves. Civilization was pushed to the brink as humanity struggled to survive the onslaught. Slowly, the Awakened began to restore order, leading to a massive conflict. Everything culminated 30 years ago during the final battle in Incheon. One of the legendary 5 war heroes stepped forward and ended the Great War. With Incheon successfully defended, the war was finally over, leaving a world of ruins. Now, 3 decades later, someone has come to find one of those heroes living in total seclusion. Shim expects to find a weathered old man living like a hermit in the snow. Suddenly, a giant creature looms over him. It's a moss duck, a bizarre monster with a duck's head and an ostrich's body. Problem is, these things never travel alone. Shim braces himself, realizing he's face to face with an A-class disaster-type monster. The birds screech, their eyes glowing with a predatory hunger. A whole stampede of them comes charging down the slope. Shim turns and runs for his life as the massive flock closes in. He can't believe anyone could actually survive out here. And things just got worse. An A-class Thunderbird has joined the hunt. The flaming bird dives from the sky, aiming straight for its prey. Desperate, Shim spots a small log cabin in the distance. He makes a break for it, hoping to find some kind of cover. The Thunderbird's talons reach out, ready to snatch him up. Electric arcs flare as the creature grabs hold of him. Shim looks up in terror as the bird prepares for the kill. He screams, certain this is the end. But a voice suddenly calls out, and the terrifying monster transforms into a cute little bird. A man stands nearby, casually leaning on a broom and telling the monsters to back off. The tiny Thunderbird drops Shim into the snow. He tumbles to the ground, gasping for air. Dazed, he watches as the flaming threat simply flies away. The man is Choi Kang-ho, and he's far younger than the 80-year-old Shim was expecting. Shim can barely get the words out as he tries to process who's standing in front of him. Kang-ho ignores the confusion and tells the rest of the pack to leave too. The moss ducks peer over the fence, looking more like curious pets than killers. With a simple wave of his hand, the legendary hero commands them. The monsters turn around and march away in perfect military order. The moss ducks march off in perfect formation, leaving Shim staring in total disbelief. Choi Kang-ho stands there with a broom, telling Shim he really shouldn't have made the trip all this way. Shim can barely find his voice, trying to confirm if this young man is actually who he thinks he is. Up close, it's impossible to tell his age. He looks like a guy in his mid-20s. Kang-ho turns toward his cabin, inviting the guest in for a meal since he's already here. Shim is reeling. This young-looking man is supposed to be the legendary war hero from 80 years ago. History remembers him as the Beast King, the powerhouse who single-handedly ended the Great War. Shim follows him inside, still struggling to reconcile the legend with the guy in slides. The interior of the cabin is surprisingly modern and organized. Shim sits at the table, noting how quiet and simple the place feels. Kang-ho grabs a frying pan, ready to whip something up for his guest. He lights the stove with a snap of his fingers, asking if his youthful looks are that shocking. He points out that his old comrades have all become high-ranking guildmasters or politicians. But while they all turned into old men, Kang-ho's body just stopped aging for some reason. Shim finds the whole babyface explanation a bit hard to swallow. Kang-ho pulls out a massive, spotted egg, mentioning how cute the baby Thunderbird is. He cracks the giant egg into the pan, while his various monster pets hang around the kitchen. Shim realizes the man isn't just surviving here, he's literally domesticating disaster-class beasts. Back in the war, he fought alongside an SS-class Phantom Fox named Seolhwa. He sets down the meal, sliding a plate and some coffee onto the tray. Kang-ho tells him to eat up and explain the real reason he came all this way. Shim takes a breath and explains that a serious problem has come up back in the city. He shows a holographic display of new type monsters, causing chaos around Busan and Daegu. Kang-ho studies the images, noting that these types haven't been seen since the war ended. Shim bows deeply, apologizing for disturbing the peace, but insisting they need his help. Before leaving, he can't help but ask why a hero would choose to live alone in such a hellscape. Kang Ho leans against the door, crossing his arms with a faint smile. He says he's waiting for something. Shim is curious, but before he can ask what, a massive white force snatches him off his feet. It's Mengqi, the S-class saber tiger, and Shim is absolutely losing it. Shim screams as the giant predator clamps down on his coat. Kang Ho waves goodbye, telling Shim that Mengqi will get him back before it gets too dangerous. The giant tiger sprints across the frozen wasteland, with Shim dangling from its jaws. Back at the cabin, Kang Ho lets out a long stretch, glad for the silence. He calls his pets over, setting down bowls for the baby Thunderbird and the other critters. With the guests gone, he gets back to work, sweeping the never-ending snow off his porch. He works through the blizzard, seemingly unbothered by the biting cold. Mengqi returns from his delivery and gives his master a giant, slobbery lick. Kang Ho just laughs, patting his massive companion. The giant saber tiger looks more like an overgrown kitten as it nuzzles against him. Meanwhile, Shim is dropped unceremoniously back at the border checkpoint. He sits there shell-shocked, trying to figure out if he just got carried like a chew toy. The guard at the gate greets him with a smile, oblivious to the trauma he just went through. Back at the gate, the guards assure Shim that they're quite used to the chaos of the wasteland. Far off in the snowy expanse, Choi Kang-ho is back on the move, riding his massive companion. He looks down at the fluffy white mane, telling Mengqi it's time for their daily rounds. The giant tiger leaps across the frozen terrain with effortless power. Kang-ho stays perfectly balanced, his eyes scanning the horizon of his lonely kingdom. Cheerwon has become a bizarre ecosystem where monsters and strange flora thrive together. His mind drifts back to 49 years ago, to this very same snowy field. That was the day he first crossed paths with the magnificent phantom fox, Seolhwa. In the present, he watches Mengqi and muses on how much the big cat has grown since then. High atop a snowy peak sits a mysterious, glowing blue egg, pulsating with energy. He remembers the nightmare of the Great Battle that ravaged the world 29 years ago. He stood alone in the ruins of the city, a single warrior against an endless tide of monsters. The horrors were everywhere, closing in from every dark corner of the urban decay, but he wasn't truly alone. A spark of immense power began to gather around him. With a roar of energy, he unleashed a devastating blue light that tore through the enemy ranks. He moved like a blur, a living weapon carved from years of survival and loss. He activated his sensory link, his eyes glowing as he called upon his contract beast. In a spectacular burst of spiritual energy, the nine-tailed Seolhwa manifested by his side. They were an unstoppable pair, the legendary Beast King and his phantom guardian. He remembers the softness of her fur under his hand, a brief moment of peace amidst the war. Seolhwa was a vision of grace and power, diving into the fray to end the conflict once and for all. He saved the world that day, but the victory came at the highest possible price. He lost Seolhwa. He can still see her face in her final moments, weary and battered from the struggle. He knelt by her side in the rubble, weeping as he apologized for everything she had endured. The grief of that moment still weighs heavily on him, even decades later. As her physical form faded, she dissolved into a pillar of brilliant, blinding light. When the light cleared, she was gone, leaving only a single glowing blue crystal behind. That crystal eventually grew into the massive egg that sits upon the mountain today. He has stayed here for 30 years, frozen in time and form, waiting for her to return. He looks up at the sky, whispering to her that the new year is about to begin. His watch counts down the final seconds of the year as a tiny frost fairy flutters past. He smiles at the little spirit, wondering if it's out to celebrate the turning of the year. He and Mengqi watch as the night sky fills with hundreds of glowing fairies. Suddenly, the massive egg on the mountain peak begins to pulse and crack with light. Kang-ho's heart skips a beat. He stares in absolute shock as the shell gives way. The crystal shatters completely, releasing a shockwave of pure white energy. A blinding flash illuminates the entire valley, marking the stroke of midnight. As the light fades, Kang-ho sits in the snow, breathless and hopeful. Emerging from the fragments is a tiny white fox with glowing blue eyes, a perfect miniature of his old friend. He crouches down in the snow, offering a soft greeting to the newborn spirit in the very place they first met. 50 years ago, Choi Kang-ho was just a soldier, caught in a nightmare. Monsters were pouring out of Cheerwon, and he was running for his life. But in the middle of all that chaos, he found a tiny white fox pup. That was the first time he met Seolhwa. It's hard to believe how much time has passed since that day, in the snow. Now, he's back in the same spot, watching Seolhwa's child wake up for the first time. The little pup is immediately full of energy, hopping around his feet. She jumps right up to give him a warm greeting. He looks at the tiny fox, wondering if she's actually trying to say hi. He gives her a little nuzzle back. In the quiet of the wasteland, he can't help but notice how much she looks like her mother. His moment of peace is cut short when he spots something in the sky and activates his beast eye. He identifies them as wind fawns, a low-rank but unusual species. He hasn't seen new type monsters like these since the Great War ended decades ago. It's a growing problem, and the news reports show that the world is in desperate need of a hero. He wonders if it's just a coincidence that Seolhwa's child woke up right when these monsters returned. With the pup on his head, he prepares to head back to civilization. He makes his way to the heart of Seoul, stopping at the massive mercenary tower. Something streaks through the night sky, headed straight for the building. The security guards inside are caught completely off guard. One of them panics, screaming that there's a giant beast on the roof. The rookies scramble to call for backup as fast as they can, but the team leader stops them, citing a very specific rule from their emergency manual. Apparently, if a young man shows up on a saber tiger, he's a VIP and a friend of the boss. Mangchi doesn't help the situation, acting all tough with his glowing eyes. Choi Kang-ho tells him to knock it off, and the beast immediately drops the act. He tells his companion to wait outside while the team leader greets him with some long overdue respect. He gives a casual wave, acting like it hasn't been years since they last spoke. He heads inside to find the one man who might have the answers he needs. On the wall, a photo shows him with a much younger version of his old comrade. He hears heavy footsteps approaching, noting how they seem to get louder as the years go by. The door bursts open, and in walks Im Chil-bae, looking every bit the legendary Iron Fist King. The old hero lets out a roar of excitement and pulls his friend into a massive bear hug. Chil-bae is 80 now, but he's still ready to drink like he's in his prime. As they sit down, something starts squirming inside the man's hoodie. The little fox pup pops her head out, finally getting some breathing room. Chil-bae leans in, sensing something very familiar about the tiny furball. It clicks immediately this has to be Seolhwa's child. Choi Kang-ho smiles and confirms it, introducing the little one as Seola. The old king is instantly won over by how cute she is. He decides this is the perfect excuse to keep the celebration going all night. But as the drinks come out, the mood shifts because Choi Kang-ho has a very serious question to ask. Chil-bae pulls up a photo on his phone, showing some pretty nasty looking monsters. He says the disaster bureau sent it over, and it's turned into a major headache for everyone. To make things worse, one of their top-ranked hunters went missing in the southern conflict zone recently. They sit down to talk, and Chol-bae admits that something big is definitely going on with these new monsters. He gets a serious look in his eyes as the weight of the situation settles in. Then he drops the real kicker. Some of these things are radiating pure demonic energy. Choi Kang-ho takes a slow sip of his drink, quietly processing the news. Chil-bae explains that this energy was what made the monsters from the Great War so savage and unstoppable. If that power is back, it means the demons that controlled them might be returning too. Chil-bae slams his glass down, trying to shake off the grim mood. He switches gears to brag, mentioning he's actually ranked 6th in Korea and 40th in the world. Kang-ho isn't exactly impressed, even while the old man complains about his rank slowly slipping. The old king pulls out a high-tech measuring device, insisting that Kang-ho needs to check his power level. Kang-ho tries to wave him off, saying he doesn't care about ranks and has no idea how to use the thing. Chil-bae pulls a low blow, threatening to take back Seola's gift if he doesn't play along. Left with no choice, he puts his arm in the ring and starts to channel his magic. The device begins to hum and crackle with intense blue electricity as he pours in his strength. That number puts him at the absolute top rank, 1 inch the country and the world. Chil-bae is absolutely floored, his cigar nearly falling out of his mouth as he asks what Kang-ho has been doing in isolation. The man just gives a calm smile, saying he's mostly just been farming and taking care of Mangchi. The old hero looks like he's questioning all his life choices, wondering if he should have just retired to the country too. The scene shifts to Kang-ho's private dungeon orchard, a hidden paradise located near his home. It's a peaceful spot where fairies and low-rank spirits help grow rare fruits to strengthen beasts. Kang-ho pulls out a massive fairy stone, a gift from the old man that's bigger than any he's ever seen. He kneels down to place the glowing crystal directly into the soil. As he touches the stone, he begins to sync his energy with the heart of the dungeon. A massive wave of magic pulses through the orchard, revitalizing everything it touches. He looks over at Seola, watching as the energy works its magic on the surrounding plants. In an instant, the fairies and spirits have doubled in size, radiating with newfound health. Seola is having a blast, jumping around and playing with her oversized garden helpers. Kang-ho checks her stats and sees she's a rare subspecies with an SS rarity, though much of her data is still hidden. He's surprised to see question marks appearing. It's the first time his beast eye has been blocked like this. Suddenly, Seola's playful mood vanishes as she senses something dangerous nearby. She takes off in a blur of white, and Kang Ho immediately calls out after her. She sprints across the snowy ground, her blue eyes focused on an unseen threat. Kang Ho follows closely behind, wondering exactly what she could have picked up on. He picks up the pace, his boots crunching through the snow as he moves to catch up. The two of them race through the trees, closing in on the source of the disturbance. Seola is small, but she's incredibly fast, weaving through the terrain with ease. Even Kang Ho is impressed by her natural speed as they reach the edge of a clearing. They come to a halt as they find a group of menacing monsters, cornering a group of weeping spirits. The hulking monsters tower over the terrified fairy, elf spirits, who can do nothing but weep as they are backed into a corner. Seola jumps in to defend a group of terrified fairies from a pack of monsters. The little fox lets out a fierce yip, ready to throw down. But she's way outclassed as a massive titanoboa towers over the tiny girls. Just then, Choi Kang-ho steps onto the scene, wondering if Seola ran all this way just to play hero. The giant snake lunges, its massive head dwarfing the little fox. Kang-ho watches from the sidelines, thinking she's still a bit too young to be taking on an A-class disaster like this. The titanoboa roars, showing off some high-level stats. Kang-ho just raises two fingers and tells it to knock it off. The monster freezes mid-strike, sensing something is very wrong. He activates his predatory instinct, and suddenly, he's the scariest thing in the woods. The giant snake loses all its fight and collapses into a heap. He grabs it by the tongue and warns it to scram, or he'll turn it into snake wine. The fairies can't believe their eyes as the massive predator just cowers before him. With a single shout, Kang-ho sends the rest of the monsters scurrying into the shadows. But the peace doesn't last long. A black, raptor-like bird appears, glowing with an eerie purple light. It's not just any monster. This one's leaking a strange, sinister energy. Seola stays on guard, sensing the shift in the air. Kang-ho narrows his eyes, immediately recognizing the demonic energy. Even though its stats look low, this raptor is a completely new type of threat. Seola doesn't wait for an order and lunges at the newcomer. Kang-ho watches the encounter, curious about where these demonic types are coming from. A dark, swirling gate sits nearby, pulsing with that same purple energy. They both jump into the fray to clear out the area. Landing softly, Kang-ho starts to wonder if a literal demon has found its way into this world. Seola suddenly begins to glow as a second tail sprouts. Her growth speed is off the charts. A whole pack of the raptors emerges from the trees, surrounding them. The little fox looks back at her master with an excited grin, asking if she can go play with them. Seeing her enthusiasm reminds Kang-ho of someone from his past. He thinks back to Seol-hwa, the companion he trained with decades ago. They were an unstoppable pair, growing stronger through every life or death battle. But those memories end in tragedy, with a final goodbye to his old friend. That's why he wanted a normal life for Seola. He didn't want her to walk that same violent path. But it's clear now that combat is just in her blood. He decides to stop holding her back and offers to form a formal contract. He places a hand on her head, and the air begins to hum with power. A massive explosion of light signals the start of their new bond as he promises to make her the strongest. Seola yaps happily as the magic flows into her. A silver contract ring manifests on Kang-ho's finger, sealing their connection. With the link established, he can now share his own vast reserves of power with her. He tells her he'll give her a little boost of his magic, since she's still young. Fully charged and glowing with energy, Seola prepares to strike. The raptors squawk in alarm as the little fox closes the distance in an instant. Through their new sensory link, Kang-ho can see exactly what the little fox sees as she dives into the pack. Seola strikes with pinpoint accuracy, her every move perfectly synchronized with her master. She lands a heavy blow on the lead raptor, sending it reeling. Her domination skill kicks in, allowing her to absorb the demonic energy from the monsters she subdues. She pins one down easily, looking more like a seasoned hunter than a tiny pet. The rest of the pack tries to scramble away, but she's already a white blur in pursuit. She bounces from tree to tree, picking them off one by one with effortless grace. Another one goes down hard, and Seola looks like she's having the time of her life. Watching from the sidelines, Kang-ho is genuinely impressed by how naturally she's taken to combat. Her stats reveal she's an SS rarity subspecies, definitely not your average woods fox. The bell on her collar jingles as the last of the sinister energy is purified. Kang-ho calls her back, noting that kids really do grow up way too fast. Seola trots over with a huge grin, practically asking for a gold star for her performance. He gives her the praise she's looking for, confirming she did a great job. He tells her it's time to head home before the gate behind them collapses for good. He turns to the remaining monsters, telling them they're free to wake up and run along now. Without that demonic influence, the creatures aren't hostile at all. They're actually kind of cute. Kang-ho smiles, realizing that as long as the dark energy is gone, everyone's a friend. He gives the order to move out, and the whole group starts hauling tail toward the exit. They dive through the swirling portal, just as the forest behind them begins to fade. The gate snaps shut, sealing the rift between worlds once and for all. They land back in the snowy mountains, and Kang-ho sticks a perfect landing. Suddenly, a dozen hands shoot into the air, reaching toward them in a grand gesture. The fairies from earlier are all kneeling in the snow, thanking the Absolute One. Kang-ho is completely blindsided by the title, wondering what he did to deserve that kind of label. They shift their focus to Seola, bowing down to her as the legendary Silver Beka. Confused by the whole situation, he asks how they can even speak his language. He asks if they're really calling this tiny thing a guardian deity. The lead fairy is overjoyed just to hear the name Seola, treating it like holy scripture. She explains that in their world, the Bek-A are worshipped as divine protectors. She tells the story of a legendary five-tailed fox who once saved their country from a corpse dragon. To these fairies, Seola isn't just a pet, she's a living legend walking among them. And since Kang-ho treats a literal god like a toddler, they figure he must be the ultimate Absolute One. Before he can argue, the group breaks into a welcome dance to honor their new savior. The lead fairy twirls around, clearly delighted to have found a protector. Kang-ho watches the display, asking if she's royalty given the crown on her head. She bows deeply and introduces herself as Johanna, the fourth princess of the Earth Fairy clan. She explains that their territory was suddenly overrun and turned into a dungeon. In the chaos, they were cast out and fell through a rift into this world. Tears well up as she tells them how the monsters stole everything they had. Kang-ho boils it down to the basics. They're homeless, miserable, and currently starving. Johanna's eyes go wide with awe, amazed that he understood their plight so perfectly. Kang-ho mentions a place near his home, an Earth Fairy dungeon known as the Orchard. He offers the homeless spirits a spot to stay there if they're interested. The fairies are beyond thrilled, breaking into cheers of Absolute One and promising their eternal worship. Kang-ho quickly tells them to dial it back, as all the bowing is getting a bit excessive. He can't help but think that Johanna acts more like a polite maid than a princess. Suddenly, the ground shakes as a massive, glowing beast with icy blue eyes emerges. The fairies shriek in terror, clutching their faces at the sight of the towering creature. Kang-ho just gives a tired smile, completely unfazed by the arrival of the giant cat. He tells Mungchi, his saber tiger, to be a good boy while the tiny fairies hitch a ride on his thick white fur. Back in civilization, Kang-ho checks his phone and sees a notification waiting for him in the middle of the night. He's been added to a group chat called 9988, filled with some very familiar names like Iron Fist Cholbei and Flame Mina. He realizes his old comrade Im Cholbei must be the one behind this digital reunion. He remembers Cholbei eagerly explaining the wonders of modern tech to him. In the chat, Sword God Park Junwoo is already barking orders at the others to meet him at Bukansan. Kang-ho smirks, noting that some things never change. These guys start bickering the moment they're in the same room. He thinks back to their glory days on the battlefield, where they fought side by side as a legendary team. Together, they were the 5 war heroes, the kind of people children now read about in history books. Seeing as it's been ages, he decides he might as well go say hi, especially since he's training Seola to be the best. He looks down at the little fox, deciding her training needs to be the best of the best too. With a simple HI, he sends his first message into the chaotic group chat. Far away at Bukansan, a massive crowd has gathered under the clear blue sky. Reporters and cameramen are everywhere, broadcasting the event live to a captivated audience. Everyone is buzzing with excitement over the news that 2 legendary heroes are about to duel for their rankings. Stepping onto the scene is World Rank 20, Park Junwoo, known as the Sword God, a fierce veteran with long gray hair and several katanas strapped to his back. His opponent is World Rank 21, Kim Ho-young, the Bow God, a disciplined archer with a sharp goatee and his hair tied in a traditional top knot. Amidst the sea of fans, a woman tries to squeeze her way through the press of bodies. It's the Flame Witch, Lee Mina, a charismatic woman with long burgundy hair and an authoritative presence. She looks completely exhausted by the fanboys, telling everyone they should just howl together and get it over with. Park Junwoo is already in full battle mode, shouting that he won't retreat even a single inch. Kim Ho-young snaps back, calling him a senile old fart who's babbling nonsense again. The sword god draws his blade, the air crackling with energy as he warns his friend not to blame the sword. Not to be outdone, the bow god readies his power, daring his rival to bring it on. Lee Mina steps in to officiate, declaring the match as a formal ranking duel under her supervision. Suddenly, she stops mid-sentence, her eyes darting towards something descending from the sky. A massive shockwave hits the ground as Kang Ho makes a grand entrance, crashing down with Seola perched on his head. With a playful smile, she tells the big brothers that the ranking match is going to have to wait. Park Jun-woo is furious, demanding to know what she's talking about when they're already past the point of no return. She just points toward the newcomer, her face lighting up with a genuine grin. Kim Ho-young's jaw drops as he realizes his old friend Kang Ho is actually standing right there. Kang Ho casually raises a hand to get their attention through the dust and debris. He gives them a friendly wave, looking remarkably relaxed with a tiny white fox sitting on his hair. His old comrades are stunned to see him, though Mina is a lot more curious about the white thing he's wearing as a hat. Choi Kang-ho looks up at the little fox on his head, promising her a day filled with delicious food and a shopping spree with his old teammates. Seola's eyes widen with curiosity, wondering just what kind of yummy surprises these legendary heroes have in store for her. The sword god, Park Jun-woo, used to lead the massive Baekye guild before he decided to step down. Now he runs a smaller guild near Bukan-san to focus on training new talent. His disciples are out there grinding, unaware that their master's legendary old friend is visiting. Jun-woo brings his guests deep into the guild's private medicinal storage. Inside, they've got a stash of moon salt, a rare and insanely expensive herb that amplifies a monster's magic power. Sola tries to take a sneak bite, but Choi Kang-ho stops her before she can swallow the whole plant. Seeing how much the little fox looks like his old beast, Seolwa, Jun-woo tells Kang-ho to just take all 20 roots for her. Im Cheol-bae pops up from around a corner, joking that Kang-ho should loot the place before the sword freak gets stingy. Jun-woo yells that he was already giving it away, clearly annoyed by the interruption. He softens up though, telling Kang-ho that if he's really grateful, he should just come by more often. Kang-ho gives a little smile and promises he'll be around. Since it's been 15 years, Jun-woo decides they're not leaving without a serious drinking session first. They set out a huge spread of meat and booze, ready to catch up on over a decade of missed time. The old guys start pouring the soju, telling Kang-ho there's no way he's running away tonight. Kang-ho just looks at them, thinking about how only their faces have aged while they're still the same rowdy idiots. They laugh it off, shouting that there's no time to worry about getting old, they just need to drink. Later, Kang-ho visits a bank where the VIP manager is practically doing yoga bows to welcome him back. He asks to withdraw some mana stones, feeling a bit awkward about all the extra attention. To Kang-ho, these high-tier stones are just the cash he needs to go shopping. The manager leads him to the private vaults, mentioning the weapon storage is ready for him whenever he wants. Outside, a guy on a bike watches the street, looking like he's waiting for a payday to walk out the door. This is Lee Jong-myung, and he's scouting for someone worth robbing. The bank staff gives Kang-ho a final bow as he steps out into the city. Lee spots him and wonders what kind of whale just walked out of the VIP room. He adjusts his special glasses, a scanner designed to peek at mana stones and hidden magic power levels. He tests it on a random guy in a suit, seeing only low-grade stones and 0 mana, a total waste of space. He's getting annoyed, thinking the bank staff is just greeting people for no reason. But then he scans Kang-ho, and his heart skips a beat when 3 S-grade mana stones light up. There's a couple of A grades and B grades in there too, all just sitting loosely in his pocket. Lee realizes he's looking at nearly 1.6 billion won in cash, just being carried around like spare change. He starts sweating, wondering if this guy is some secret S-class hunter. But the scanner shows magic power not detected, making him think the guy is just a wealthy, non-awakened civilian. To him, Kang-ho is nothing more than a walking lottery ticket waiting to be cashed in. He radios his boss, telling him they've officially hit the jackpot in Yongdongpo. Totally oblivious, or maybe just hungry, Kang-ho stops for some street food, while Lee trails him from a distance. The bike stays close, waiting for him to get away from the main crowds. Kang-ho eventually turns into a quiet side street and slips into a hidden shop on 12th Street. Inside, the Beast King elder welcomes him, noting that it's been about 15 years since the Beast King last visited. She asks about Mungchi, the last tiger he brought in, assuming it must be a powerhouse by now. But when she looks at Seola, she notices something very different about this new one. Kang-ho confirms she's a subspecies, and she lets out some blue sparks to show off her power. The elder is stunned, saying she's lived for 100 years and has never seen a phantom beast like this before. She smiles, hoping the Beast King can raise yet another legendary battle beast with this little one. It's been 50 years since Daybreak changed the world, and some places have adapted better than others. Choi Kang-ho walks down the streets of Yeongdeungpo's 12th Street, looking at all the different races that have made this place their home. This district was formed by refugees from another dimension, called the Continent of Mu, and they've kept their own unique cultures alive here. Some of those races are well known, like the witches, the same race as Lee Mina, one of the 5 legendary heroes. They're a magical people who spend nearly 80% of their lives looking eternally young. But Kang-ho is here for a different group, the Blacksmith clan, better known as the Dwarves. As soon as he steps into a workshop, the owner, Smith, comes running out with a massive grin to greet him. Smith asks if he found the rare items he was looking for, and Kang-ho just gives him a casual, more or less. The dwarf mentions he's swamped with orders from top guilds like Baekya, but he's never too busy for an old friend. Kang-ho asks for a favor, reaching for something on his wrist. Smith's eyes practically bulge out when he sees the Aura Blade bracelet, calling it a peerless treasure. Kang-ho asks if he can get it tuned up, since it hasn't seen proper maintenance in 15 years. Smith doesn't even hesitate. He says Kang-ho's requests are always top priority because dwarves never forget a favor. He shouts at his boys to drop everything they're working on because Mr. Choi's gear comes first. Kang-ho just laughs, seeing that the old blacksmith is just as intense as he remembers. Outside, the raiders' gang is keeping watch, and their leader, Lee Jong-myung, can't believe the expensive loot this guy is carrying. He decides they don't even need to scan him anymore, they'll just jump him as soon as he's away from the workshop. Back inside, Smith finishes the maintenance and even throws in a light upgrade for good measure. He explains that it'll be much easier to handle magic power now, and he even boosted the maximum output. Kang-ho puts the glowing bracelet back on, feeling like he might have a chance to test it out sooner than he thought. He gives a friendly wave as he heads back out into the alleyways. Suddenly, the raiders ambush him, surrounding him with drawn weapons, as Lee calls out for the boys to move in. Kang-ho doesn't look bothered at all, just noting that they all decided to pop out at once. Lee laughs at his confidence, wondering where a non-awakened civilian gets the nerve to act so tough. Kang-ho just asks if he's using one of those standard magic power scan lenses to check his level. He points out that those cheap lenses can only read up to 100,000 magic power, which is why Lee thinks he's weak. Lee starts to sweat, feeling the weight of Kang-ho's sudden shift in tone. Panicked, he orders his men to attack, but they're already outmatched before they even swing. Kang-ho casually starts the magic release on his upgraded Aura Blade. Blue energy surges around him as he fully activates the weapon. In an instant, the entire gang is sent flying through the air by a single invisible force. Lee is left huffing in shock, his confidence completely shattered. His scanner is still uselessly blinking, not detected because the power level is just off the charts. He finally realizes he's dealing with a monster that exceeds the 100,000 threshold. Kang-ho stands there, surrounded by a torrential surge of blue aura, looking like the legend he is. He pulls out his phone to check a wanted list, and Lee's face is right there at the top. He notes that Lee is a former executive of the Baekya Guild who turned to a life of kidnapping and murder. Seeing that he's in way over his head, Lee decides his only option is to run for it. He activates his unique assassin ability, hoping his speed will save him. He blurs through the city streets, leaving trails of purple energy as he flees. He boasts to himself that no one has ever managed to catch him once he uses this skill. But he nearly jumps out of his skin when Kang-ho suddenly appears right beside him, asking why he'd choose to live a life like this. Lee Jong-myung reacts with shock as Kang-ho makes his move. He's slammed into the pavement, realizing that even as a top-ranked hunter, he's no match for this level of power. Panicked, he frantically looks around, unable to track where his opponent will strike next. Kang-ho looms over the fallen villain, his expression cold and unimpressed. Lee is left broken and shivering on the ground, his clothing torn from the intensity of the struggle. Kang-ho checks the Aura Blade on his wrist, satisfied with the precision and efficiency of Smith's upgrades. He notes that Lee is part of the war generation too, likely over 50 years old. Kang-ho asks him why, after surviving such a hellish conflict, he would choose to live like a common criminal. Lee's expression turns manic as he screams that peace is boring, and he craves the blood and slaughter of the past. A grim realization follows. Those who became addicted to the horrors of the battlefield often lose themselves to a path of crime. Lee's face is twisted into a crazed, bloodthirsty grin as he admits his sanity is slipping from boredom. Kang-ho stares him down, his gaze full of silent disappointment. The scene shifts to a quiet meeting where Park Jun-woo, the sword god, and his unnamed disciple are sharing a drink. Park Jun-woo laughs, teasing his disciple for being shocked that Kang-ho still looks so youthful. The unnamed disciple admits that for such a legendary war hero, Kang Ho seemed surprisingly gentle in temperament. Park takes a thoughtful sip of his drink, his expression darkening slightly. He warns the younger man that once you really know him, Kang Ho has a nasty personality, especially toward criminals. The image of Kang Ho flaring his blue aura serves as a stark contrast to his usual calm demeanor. Fulfilling the warning, a powerful punch connects with the criminal's face, illustrating Park's point about Kang Ho's ruthlessness. The impact is devastating, sending blood flying as Kang Ho deals with the threat without a shred of mercy. Back at the table, Park's phone buzzes with an incoming video call from Choi Kang Ho. Park answers with an excited grin, surprised that his old friend is actually reaching out first for once. Kang Ho points the camera toward the battered Lee Jung-myung, asking if the name rings a bell. Park's face instantly twists into a mask of pure rage as he recognizes the trash who stained the Baekje Guild's reputation. He bellows into the phone, threatening to personally rip the man's limbs off for his crimes. Lee Jung-myung's eyes go wide with horror as he finally realizes he has been caught by the legendary Beast King. Terrified, he grovels and insists he was only hunting a thief known as Phantom who cleaned out their stashes. He explains that this thief always leaves behind a single black card after a heist. Kang Ho silences him by grabbing him firmly, his hand glowing with a dangerous blue energy. Lee screams in agony as he feels his very essence being drained from his body. Kang Ho tells him that he has destroyed his mana hole, ensuring he can never use his abilities to hurt anyone again. Crushed, Lee wails that being an ordinary person is a fate worse than death. Kang Ho stares him down, telling him to let the emptiness in his mana hole be a permanent reminder of the peace he disrespected. As he walks away, Kang Ho reflects on the heavy price paid for the peace that people like Lee take for granted. He turns his attention to the little beast, Seola, promising her a nutritious meal, but only after a long overdue bath. Seola is sent flying, looking absolutely terrified of the water. A hand reaches out to catch the panicking fox. Choi Kang Ho dunks her straight into a tub of glowing energy. He tells her she hates baths as much as her mother Hua did, but this one is mandatory. This isn't just a tub of soapy water though. He pulls out a world tree fruit that he picked up during his last shopping trip. He uses his magic to melt the rare fruit down and mix it into the warm water. Kang Ho tries to soothe her, asking if it smells nice and if the temperature is okay. It seems to work, and Seola starts relaxing into the soak. He's glad she's finally enjoying the luxury. He grinds up a bit of the fruit peel and starts rubbing it into her body. This is designed to toughen up her fur and skin, turning her into a real tank. The water starts turning to steam almost instantly, which even surprises him. The effect is huge, and it's happening faster than expected. Seola pops up, looking completely refreshed and full of life. Kang Ho ponders why the treatment is working so exceptionally well on her. A system message confirms she's gained the Guardian of Nature trait, boosting her energy absorption by 50%. He lets out a small chuckle, realizing he's got a real prodigy on his hands. With the bath done, he lets her know it's finally time to eat. The Princess Fairy and her crew haul in some massive ingredients, including giant carrots. Kang Ho grabs his wok and gets ready to whip up the main course. The little spirits help out, tossing in legendary herbs like Violga root. He notes that regular fire wouldn't even be enough to crack the shells on these things. Then he pulls out a handful of high-grade mana stones, making the Princess Fairy freak out. He tosses the stones into the stove like he's just adding coal. The kitchen erupts in a massive blast of mana and fire. The poor fairy is screaming, convinced the whole house is about to blow. Kang Ho doesn't even flinch, his hands steady amidst the swirling blue flames. He keeps tossing the wok, perfectly controlling the violent magical fire. The ingredients sizzle as they're infused with an insane amount of energy. The fairy watches from the side, absolutely terrified by the scale of his power. She shouts out an acknowledgement as he finishes up the process. The result is a glowing golden dough that's practically vibrating with magic. He starts rolling the mixture into small, bite-sized portions. These energy dumplings are glowing with a fierce blue light in the pan. The Princess Fairy whispers in his ear, clearly amazed by what he's just made. She's never seen anything cooked with this kind of intensity. Seola is already drooling, staring at the treats with pure desperation. He offers the first dumpling to her, while everyone else watches with bated breath. She gobbles it down, and her eyes immediately start glowing blue. The fairies cheer and celebrate the successful meal. A massive surge of energy erupts from the fox as the dumpling takes effect. Kang Ho looks at Sola and can't help but think about how he raised her mother, Seola. Back then, he was a soldier who treated his companions like tools of war instead of living beings. He regrets not knowing any better, seeing how much more peaceful life is when you actually care for them. He watches the little fox play, determined to give her the life her mother never had. They spend their days together in the snowy mountains, forming a bond that's about more than just power. For the first time, he's actually enjoying the quiet moments of companionship. He gives her a gentle pat, a stark contrast to the hard-nosed warrior he used to be. They've become inseparable, a man and his beast navigating the cold together. Even when she's fast asleep, he's right there to make sure she's safe and warm. The story shifts to another man, a weary survivor who once found himself alone in the frozen wilderness of Cherwan. Amidst the snow, he spotted a tiny, abandoned cub, a monster that most people would have killed on sight. But instead of raising a weapon, the old man knelt down, feeling a strange sense of pity for the creature. The little thing looked up with innocent eyes, completely unaware that it was supposed to be a deadly predator. Despite the danger, the man couldn't bring himself to leave it there to freeze. The cub let out a tiny sneeze, and in that moment, the old man's heart was officially won over. He reached into his pack and pulled out a piece of jerky, offering it to the starving beast. The cub gobbled it down like it was the best thing it had ever tasted. It even gave him a thankful lick on the nose, marking the start of a very unusual friendship. When it was time to leave, the man assumed the little guy would stay behind in its natural habitat. He gave a wave and started his trek back, thinking that was the end of it. But the cub had other plans, immediately tailing him through the deep snow. Before he knew it, the tiny beast had grown into a loyal companion that practically bowled him over with affection. He laughed, naming the creature Mengqi and treating it like the family he had lost. As time passed, Mengqi grew larger and stronger, but never lost that cub-like devotion to his savior. They became each other's world, two lonely souls finding comfort in the middle of a harsh, monster-filled land. The old man watched Mengqi grow, proud of the beast he had raised, with nothing but kindness. He spent his final years with a friend by his side that was more loyal than any human. But eventually, the man's health started to fail, and he began to weaken under the strain of the Mu continent disease. One day, his strength finally gave out, and he collapsed into the freezing snow. He looked up with weary eyes, realizing that his time might finally be running out. Mengqi wouldn't let him go that easily, grabbing the old man and trying to shield him from the cold. Using every bit of his monstrous strength, the beast leaped across the landscape, desperate to find help. He looked down at his human friend with eyes full of panic, pleading with him to stay awake. The old man could only watch in a daze, as his furball proved just how much he actually cared. Mengqi charged through the blizzard, carrying the weight of the only person who had ever shown him love. But their desperate flight was interrupted by the arrival of soldiers, who saw nothing but a dangerous S-class monster. The military didn't care about the man on the beast's back. They only saw a target that needed to be put down. Mengqi stood his ground, shielding the old man from the weapons aimed directly at them. A strike connected, drawing blood from the creature that was only trying to save a life. Despite being wounded, Mengqi refused to move, his priority remaining the protection of his friend. The soldiers swarmed him, using spears and blades to bring the massive tiger to its knees. Under the relentless assault, the beast finally fell, bleeding into the snow while still trying to stay by the old man's side. Mengqi is finally brought down, his body battered and bloody from the soldiers' relentless attacks. The soldiers don't hesitate, closing in on the fallen creature with their weapons at the ready. But then, Choi Kang-ho arrives, standing amidst the falling snow like a silent judge. He stares at the unfolding tragedy, his eyes filled with a quiet, dangerous intensity. He remembers the cub Mengqi once was a small, innocent creature that only wanted to survive. Nearby, the old man's hand clutches at his chest, his life finally reaching its limit in the freezing cold. Kang-ho reaches out, a surge of energy manifesting as he decides to put an end to the soldiers' interference. The old man's eyes reflect the weariness of a long life, one that is finally coming to a close. Mengqi can only watch, a low whimper escaping as he realizes his friend is slipping away forever. The beast stayed by the man's side until his very last breath, mourning the loss of the only person who had been kind to him. It was a bond that even the military's weapons couldn't break. After the funeral, Kang-ho officially became Mengqi's new companion, carrying the cub on his shoulders as they left the past behind. Years later, Mengqi still returns to the site, standing before a simple monument in the middle of the wasteland. The photograph of the old man is weathered by time, but the memory of his face remains as clear as ever. Kang-ho looks on, a small, knowing smile touching his lips as he sees Mengqi's unwavering devotion. Back in the present, Mengqi walks alongside Kang-ho and Seola, the group finally finding a sense of belonging together. Even now, big fat tears roll down the tiger's face whenever he thinks about his first master. Kang-ho gives Seola a reassuring pat, reminding himself to cherish the new family he's building. Suddenly, the mountain quiet is ripped apart by a swarm of massive predatory wasps charging toward them. Choi Kang-ho and his crew come across a massive, floating insect. It's a battle bee, an E-rank monster that's a nightmare when it brings a few hundred friends along. Seola takes one look at it and asks if this one's hers to deal with. She doesn't wait for an answer, leaping straight at the oversized bug. A quick crunch later, and the fox has herself a little snack. A fragment of the bee's shell drops right into Kang-ho's palm. He takes a moment to inspect the piece, figuring out exactly what they're dealing with. It's not just a one-off, there's a massive swarm buzzing further up the mountain. Kang-ho climbs onto Mung-chi, and they start charging toward the source of the noise. They pass a giant carcass that's been picked clean by those winged scavengers. Just ahead, they find what they're looking for, a swirling red gate portal. Without hesitating, the trio dives right into the eye of the storm. Inside the gate, they find a distorted landscape that's been completely taken over by the hive. Mung-chi races through the darkness as the air gets thicker with the sound of wings. Kang-ho lets his power flow, his eyes glowing with ancient mana. The swarm doesn't take long to react to the intruders. Countless hives hang from the ceiling like giant pulsing sacks. These ones are D-rank kingdom bees, bigger, nastier guards for the queen. Kang-ho doesn't even break a sweat, swatting a bee away with his bare hand. The strike sends the massive insect flying into the distance. Suddenly, the entire sky inside the gate is filled with thousands of angry stingers. Even with a literal wall of monsters coming at them, Kang-ho stays perfectly calm. He syncs his mana with Seola, sharing his strength through their sensory link. Mung-chi bares his teeth, ready to plow through anything in their path. They take off like a rocket, turning into a streak of pure energy. They blast through the front lines of the swarm, scattering bugs in every direction. Kang-ho keeps his focus sharp, clearing a path through the endless insects. Seola is having the time of her life, screaming along with the chaos. Kang-ho gives a little smirk, realizing just how much power he's actually working with. Bees are getting shredded left and right as they force their way deeper into the hive. Mung-chi makes a massive leap, targeting the largest hive in the center. Kang-ho looks into the dark hole at the core, sensing a heavy presence waiting for them. He gathers a massive amount of energy, the air around him beginning to vibrate. One powerful smash sends a shockwave through the entire structure. A massive cloud of dark aura erupts from the impact point. As the dust settles, a tall, imposing figure steps out of the gloom. It's a high-ranking demon, his eyes glowing red with murderous intent. But the second he feels Kang-ho's aura, he immediately throws his hands up in surrender. Kang-ho just stands there, completely confused by the demon's sudden change of heart. The demon, Teo Itilu Gamigin, starts explaining himself as fast as he can. Kang-ho and Seola look on, skeptical but willing to hear the guy out. They decide to keep him around for info, though he doesn't look like much of a threat now. Choi Kang-ho looms over the demon, his aura manifesting as a terrifying predator. The pressure is absolute, dark energy swirling around the legendary Beast King. Teo Itilu Gamigin can barely breathe, his hands shot up in an immediate, desperate surrender. He's sweating buckets, realizing he just ran into the one person he should have avoided at all costs. Kang-ho just stands there with Mung-chi, looking way too calm for someone facing a high-ranking demon. Teo's mind flashes back to the true monsters, the mindless killing machines from the Great War. Kang-ho has Seola perched on his shoulder, looking like he's just taking a casual stroll. The demon seems to have accepted his fate, though he looks pretty miserable about it. Seola gives Kang-ho a little nudge, probably asking if she can play with their new guest. Teo tries to make a break for it, but he doesn't get very far before the terror sets back in. Kang-ho's focus shifts to a massive glowing insect that seems to be the source of the hive's power. It's the queen bee, pulsing with a golden light that fills the dark chamber. They approach the glowing creature, Teo following behind like a kicked puppy. To Kang-ho's surprise, the demon starts petting the giant bug like it's some kind of prize-winning poodle. He even pulls out a smaller, fossilized version of the insect, holding it out with pride. Teo seems genuinely attached to his pets, which is a weird look for a supposed harbinger of doom. Mung-chi isn't impressed and decides to see if the glowing bugs taste as good as they look. Seola isn't interested in the bugs. She's busy terrorizing Teo, clinging to him like a fluffy white shadow. The little fox is relentless, and Teo can only flail around while she treats him like a climbing post. Kang-ho's expression goes cold as he remembers the demonic energy he fought decades ago. He gathers a swirl of blue mana in his hand, deciding it's time to put a safety lock on this guy. Before Teo can react, Kang-ho slams his hand onto the demon's chest. There's no mercy in his eyes, he's sealing away the creature's power for good. The demon screams as the energy is forcibly suppressed, leaving him completely drained. Teo collapses to the ground, panting and powerless, while Seola watches him with curiosity. Kang Ho looks back at his new companion, making sure the seal took hold. The demon seems to have calmed down, probably because he realized he's lucky just to be alive. Meanwhile, outside the gate, a massive purple portal is swirling in the middle of a snowy mountain range. A crowd has gathered, but these aren't spectators, they're high-ranking hunters waiting to claim the loot. Rare mana crystals are already starting to manifest around the entrance, a sign of the riches within. In the middle of the crowd, an SS-class hunter named King is putting on a show with a flashy flying kick. His guildmates watch from the sidelines, looking more like a group of fanboys than professional hunters. King flashes a cocky grin, clearly more interested in his public image than the actual danger. He even takes a second to snap a selfie with a peace sign while people are still running around in the background. He's completely focused on his phone, treating a life or death situation like a social media post. His opponent, a burly hunter named Broken, is absolutely fuming at the blatant disrespect. King just chuckles, checking his likes and comments while he waits for the next move. Broken loses his cool and lunges forward, but King dodges the strike without even looking up. The influencer finally puts his phone away, ready to finish this little performance once and for all. But the show is interrupted when the portal suddenly ripples, and two figures step out into the cold air. At the same time, Broken is sent tumbling through the snow, clutching his bloodied face. Kang Ho looks around at the spectacle, completely unimpressed by the group of real hunters waiting for him. Choi Kang Ho and Teo Italu Gamagin step out of the gate, finding the hunter Broken collapsed in the snow. A massive crowd of hunters and spectators has gathered around the portal, and they're all stunned by the sudden arrival. "Wait, someone is coming out," one of the guild members shouts, pointing toward the swirling energy. Kang Ho looks on with indifference, the portal's residual energy pulsing behind him. The gathered hunters are paralyzed with shock, unable to believe that survivors emerged from a red gate. King, however, is not pleased about the interruption, his body flaring with a violent green aura. He grits his teeth in fury, his ego bruised by the fact that he's no longer the center of attention. Teo is visibly shaken by the influencer's intense pressure, but Kang Ho doesn't seem to notice. The two stand face to face, a clash of generations, as the old legend meets the modern star. King loses his patience and grabs Kang Ho by the front of his shirt, demanding an explanation. Kang Ho remains remarkably calm, simply raising a finger to tell the young man to back off. "Don't you know who I am?" King screams, his voice echoing across the snowy mountainside. He continues to bark threats, convinced that his SS class status gives him the right to act this way. To Kang Ho, the shouting is nothing more than annoying noise, and his expression reflects his boredom. Teo leans over, perhaps sensing the danger and trying to warn his companion not to escalate things. But Choi Kang Ho just lets out a soft smirk, his mana beginning to flare as he prepares to show King true power. This influencer named King is having a total meltdown, screaming his head off at anyone who will listen. He actually thinks he can take on the legend and launches himself into the air for a flashy attack. He lands right in front of the group, still trying to play the big shot despite everyone's confusion. That's when Lee Hyuk, the master of the White Knight Guild, steps in with a presence that instantly shifts the mood. He pulls up a clip of his master, Park Jun-woo, on his phone, and things are starting to click for him. He glances over at Kang Ho, finally realizing the absolute monster he's standing in front of. King is still running his mouth, completely oblivious to the fact that his life is about to get much harder. Kang Ho just hits him with this wide, overly polite smile that feels more threatening than a punch. In Lee Hyuk's head, his master's voice is screaming a warning. If this guy smiles like a saint, it means someone is about to get demolished. Kang Ho keeps that creepy, kind grin locked in place while waiting for the influencer to make a move. King pauses for a second, feeling the sudden, heavy shift in the atmosphere. But his ego is way too big to stop now, and he starts charging up a glowing green energy punch. He throws a heavy right hook, making sure it looks good for his imaginary audience. He follows up with a series of flashy strikes, putting on a real performance. He's actually grinning, fully convinced he's about to become the world's next #1 hunter. Teo watches from the side, looking a little stressed as the green energy flashes around. But the show ends instantly when Kang Ho just reaches out and catches the guy by his tie. Without a single word, Kang Ho starts dragging the influencer straight toward the glowing red dungeon gate. King is absolutely losing it, screaming as they both get pulled into the portal. They tumble through the chaotic blue void, and it looks like a total nightmare for the S rank. Kang Ho is just casually dragging him along as if he's taking out a bag of trash. They hit the rocky ground inside the dungeon, and King looks like he's already had enough. He scrambles back, gasping for air and looking completely terrified of what's coming next. Kang Ho looks down at him, his saintly smile gone and replaced by the face of a true warrior. King isn't ready to give up his dignity yet, and tries to get back on his feet for another round. He lunges forward, swinging wildly with everything he has left. He puts his entire soul into one last powered-up punch. Kang-ho doesn't even dodge, he just catches the guy's face in one hand midair. Then he slams him face first into the dirt with enough force to shake the entire dungeon. Lee Hyuk and Tae-oh can only watch from the sidelines, literally breaking out in a cold sweat at the sight. Tae-oh looks pretty stunned by how easily an S rank just got dismantled. Kang-ho stands over the bruised influencer, who's now just a crumpled mess on the floor. He turns back to the others as if he didn't just casually crater the ground with a human head. A little while later, Kang-ho sits down to rest, while King slowly starts to wake up. The influencer is barely recognizable at this point, staring blankly with a face full of bruises. But instead of reflecting on his life, he looks at his reflection and starts chuckling to himself. Kang-ho watches, totally confused, as the kid starts fumbling around with his phone. It turns out King is actually taking a selfie of his beaten face and typing out some deep hashtags about being a frog in a well. He's already busy posting it for engagement, proving that some things just can't be beaten out of people. The dungeon gate behind them finally implodes, signaling the end of the raid. Social media is already blowing up with rumors about King's disappearance and mysterious men on a tiger. Meanwhile, Taeo's just staring up at the snow, completely fascinated by the white stuff falling from the sky. Theo reaches out to the falling snow, mesmerized by something he's never seen in his home world. He explains that these dungeons aren't just monster dens, they're bridges slowly merging the demon realm with Earth. His mood shifts as he starts talking about the 72 monarchs who rule over his realm. Kang-ho stays silent, listening to the history of the world he's been fighting for 50 years. Theo describes it like a plague, showing how the demonic aura is slowly beginning to choke the planet. The scale of the threat is massive, but Kang-ho doesn't look even remotely intimidated. Theo looks back at him, his eyes glowing with a bit of his old, royal intensity. He mentions the other monarchs, the real power players that humanity hasn't even begun to face. He flashes a sharp grin, revealing his fangs as he drops the bombshell that he was actually the fourth among them. He asks for a taste of his old power, and Kang-ho casually reaches for the blue bracelet on his wrist. With a quick tap, the seal holding back Theo's massive mana pool is finally broken. A giant pillar of purple energy erupts from the boy, shaking the entire snowy mountain. Theo looks ecstatic as the dark mana starts spiraling into a whirlpool around his body. Kang-ho stands his ground, watching as the student he picked up starts acting like a true king. Suddenly, the ground splits open, and a colossal skeletal hand reaches up toward the sky. Dozens of smaller undead with glowing red eyes follow, revealing that Kang-ho just unleashed a literal king of the dead.